Rick Stein, OBE. Welcome to Wozedu.com. Thank you very much for putting us up down here and having a chat with us today.
Pleasure.
Yeah, know about the concept. It's an educational networking system that we're putting into place. Obviously, you're an advocate of all sorts of training, especially in your own industry, which is, of course, being a chef. I know you've got a career that pans all sorts, television, obviously the cookery, and probably another few couple of bits on the side, the hotel being one. I want to talk a bit about your backstory, where you've come from, and where you're going in the future, because let's face it, it's all about reinvention as well, and where you could go furthermore. So,
well, I think it is really. I mean, at a time when I see all those graduates without work and thinking if only I could persuade them to come into the hotel and catering industry, where we're always looking for bright people to make a career in catering. I mean, my background wasn't initially in catering. In fact, I went to university to Oxford, and when I left university, I had no specific idea what I wanted to do. I'd done journalism at Oxford, albeit in a part-time basis for the university newspaper, and read English. And I only really stumbled into running restaurants and latterly hotels and shops and everything else we do, really on the back of a rather youthful idea to open a nightclub in Padstow in the early 70s. Unfortunately, it didn't. It was my first notable failure in business. I think out of failures often comes a great deal of good, and that was certainly the case for me, because I discovered then that I never ever wanted to have anything to do with nightclubs again, and turned to operating a restaurant in the same building, simply because I needed to find something to do to pay the bills. It was either that or go bust, and I had private money in the restaurant, I didn't want to let down my backers, who included my mother, so I became a cook.
Rick, can we take you back to the uni days? Obviously, you said you read English and practiced journalism with the university paper. Was the course your choice, or was it more of a choice that your parents had maybe suggested, or someone around you had maybe said, Rick, I think this is maybe a good way to go?
No, it was my choice, and funnily enough, I went to university as a rather mature student. Well, I felt very mature. I think I was about 22 at the time. Hardly seems mature now, but the reason for that was I spent a couple of years actually travelling around the world on my own, hitchhiking a lot of the time, and I read a lot during that period. I had done English at A level, and it was really as a result of reading endlessly while waiting for lifts somewhere in the middle of Australia that I hit on the idea of maybe I did want to pursue a bit more academic involvement after I got back. After all, when I left school rather hurriedly, I wasn't expelled, but I wasn't exactly enjoying my boarding school. I had no intention of doing anything academic after that, but I came back from my round the world trip and got into Oxford and spent 3 years from about 22 to 24, 25 there, very happily, I must say.
What kind of cook were you at university? Were you the go-to guy for a good meal back then, or did the passion grow sort of as the opportunity came, if you like?
Well, it grew, because I mean, this is talking about the early 70s, where the whole sort of foodie movement was very much in its infancy. But I do recall at the time living in for 2 years and then moving out into digs. In fact, it was my brother, who was a don at Oxford, his house, he left it, and moving in there and actually cooking quite elaborate meals with my flatmates, I suppose, mainly taken from either Elizabeth David or the novelist Len Deighton's cookery book, which he wrote a cookery book about the time that he wrote the Ipcris File, which was about the same time that the shop Habitat appeared on the scene, where they were selling very smart knives and chopping boards and lovely pots and pans from France. And Len Deighton wrote this book about equipment, and myself and my best friend Martin at the time, still is, decided to do a series of dinner parties, which was a bit weird in the 70s, but we cooked very nice things like sort of prawns with garlic mayonnaise and jugged hare and various sort of steak dishes and petit pois à la France, I recall.
So we can pin back the "Come Dine with Me" movement all the way back to the 70s.
Yeah,
and,
maybe I
stake
should
a claim for that.
consider doing a sort of university undergraduate's cookery book at some stage.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that would go down really well. I needed it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was the worst culprit.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think there might be. I mean, a few people have tried it, but I've often thought really to write a book assuming absolutely no knowledge from the people you're writing for would be really fun to do. And you'd start with how to chop things up properly, I think, just as Len Dayton did in those long off days.
I think the basics are important, and you've got to obviously start somewhere. I know recently you've been involved in apprenticeship schemes. Nick Clegg, Deputy PM, and yourself, I think, have been involved somewhere along the lines, and you're offering apprenticeships and getting involved along those lines.
Yeah, me and Nick got on very well, actually.
Good.
But I mean, it's really stemmed from a belief of all of us that that really we do offer quite serious employment opportunities in Cornwall, but it's very difficult to persuade people to go into our industry. I mean, I think it's historic, really, because I remember in the late 70s, one of my school chums said to me, Rick, why are you in such a third-class industry as catering? And he was also in catering. I said, well, why are you? And he said, well, because I love it. And I said, well, so do I. But it is hard. I think people are a bit put off by the hours. I think possibly in our case, because our main restaurant is really well known, I think people are put off that they wouldn't have the qualities, the abilities to work in such a place, which of course is totally wrong. I mean, we do have a very serious training program, but anyway, most of our people that work in the restaurant are in their sort of early 20s, and I think it's generally a very good fun place to work. But it is hard to persuade people, and also to persuade them that there is a career in it, because I think a lot of people think of catering as something you do as a university student. You go and do a job in the summer waiting somewhere. But of course, if you show any aptitude whatsoever, there are enormous possibilities in catering, and chance to earn tons and tons of money and travel all over the world.
Because obviously careers don't have to be rigid. You can maybe go into one area and maybe branch out into something else, as I've mentioned with you before. But
branching out, yes. Well, yeah. It's funny because I think a lot of young men particularly go into cooking in restaurants because they basically can't think of anything to do better at the time.
Sure.
And a lot fall by the wayside because it is very demanding, the job, and the hours are long. But I always think that you don't have to end up as a chef if you start cooking, but basically I think that the disciplines you learn as a chef are disciplines that will stand you good for the rest of your life, and they involve quite sort of sophisticated management principles, really. I mean, these days our head chefs all have to be very computer literate because all the stock that comes in and all the sales that go out are computer controlled. So I do think, apart from just the management techniques, it's also the fact that you're not afraid of hard work. And I mean, I am showing my age here now, but I think a lot of young people don't sort of realise that if you want to do well in life, you've got to work hard.
How do you actually inspire these young people and physically get them out? Would something like this educational network pull them out of the abyss if it was instilled quite young?
Well, I think it would pull people out of the abyss, because I think a lot of the time that people leave education with no awareness that you've got to be a bit savvy to get into the world of work. Yeah. You don't just roll up with a degree and sort of say, here I am, particularly these days. I think a lot of it, I mean, it depends on actually doing something as basic as starting a CV, I'm sure many people wouldn't realise that actually if you did a bit of work experience at 15 or something, it would be a good idea to start there, because when I look at CVs, I'm looking at indications of commitment, really. And I mean, it's like the sort of the idea of the T-boy starting in the BBC and ending up as Director General. I mean, that's how it happens. People show a willingness to work all hours and to put that extra in. And a simple thing like starting with a CV where you would very keen to get out of school and getting into work experience. But also, I think there's a sort of, the thing I like about the website is the fact that it's sort of addressing the issues of employment from a young person's point of view. I mean, we've all probably got dire stories about going to careers people at school. I remember a friend of mine who's now got 2 very successful restaurants in London was at Eton. Mm-hmm. He's a chap called Sam Harrison. And this was only like in the 80s, early 80s, when I believe the careers master at Eton said, "Sam, nobody from Eton has ever gone into catering." So you've got to sort of, I think it's sort of like, it's a bit like, Facebook works for sort of, showing films of you being pissed at parties and probably photos that you will never, ever be able to get rid of and wish you could. But I think that it does need a sort of a website where you can actually talk about how to get jobs. I don't think there's plenty of stuff at school and university about how to, learn facts, but how do you go about getting jobs? It's not easy, but there are certain things that can help you. And I think if there is a sort of place where everybody can sort of dip in and exchange advice and tips and all that, it's a great help.
A couple of final questions. First one being, how many times would it take a young upstart to come round to your restaurant, knock on the door and say, "Excuse me, sir, can I have some work experience?" for you to actually say, "Do you know what, I'm going to give you a week"?
Seriously, it would take no time at all, because like I said, we're always interested in nous, in people with a bit of go in them. And if you say you're aged 16, I don't even know what the minimum age for doing work experience. Do you know in Australia now you can't do work experiences in kitchens because of the health and safety regulations as far as young people are concerned? I mean, where's the world going? What?
I think we need to deregulate it a little bit and just,
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It is.
All this PC stuff like that.
I remember my son did work experience, and his first thing was witnessing a brain operation. That's the sort of thing.
Oh yeah, that's the kind of eye-opener, isn't it? Of course, that you need.
Yeah. What was the question anyway?
The question was, would you let a young upstart come in if he knocked on your door? How many times would you expect him to come back for you to say, "Look, son, kid, I'm going to..." Never.
I mean, because the thing is that what we're really tuned into is enthusiasm, and the next generation comes from somebody knocking on the door and saying, I want to learn how to do this.
Yeah. Also, let's talk about zest for life and the way it's all about reinvention. You've just opened a new restaurant in Australia, that's correct?
Yes, yeah. It is, yeah.
And that's almost like opening up a new chapter, and life rolls on and it all continues. And what makes you in the morning when you get the snooze come up on your alarm, what makes you just tap it off and get up and get in the shower and go?
I think, it's that fabulous Irish word, the crack, it's just that I just like the fun of it all, and I think the most important thing really is I know it sounds a bit trite, but it's to have fun. Mm-hmm. And fun doesn't mean, going out to the pub or going to the disco. It means enjoying what you're doing and really getting a lot of excitement and fun out of it.
And just one more thing. If you could give one piece of advice to our viewers, what would it be and why?
I think it's more or less what I've been saying. Be enthusiastic. Don't let yourself go. If you're excited about something, involve other people. Tell other people, because nothing is more infectious, I think, than a genuine love and sense of enthusiasm about something.